And we are live. Black Comic Lords in the building one more time. It is your Friday night happy hour of Wakanda whiskey and blerdom. I'm your host, Paul. With me, as usual, is my partner, Marc. And we're here to talk about Wakanda, whiskey, and whatever other blurtish ramblings come through our whiskey-addled minds.
That's actually true.
Well, we're in the aftermath of Wakanda Forever. And if you're following Twitter, what you sipping on, by the way?
A couple of weeks ago, you mentioned Glenlivet's sherry cask, not sherry cask, but Caribbean cask. I asked the dudes at my liquor store about it to see if they had it. He said he did, but he said that he liked the Doors Caribbean cask, rum cask better. So I went and picked this up.
Doors.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not a fan. I typically don't.
It's
like
Doers. Of course, you're not a fan. That's like rock gut, dude.
Well, I'm not gonna say that, but it's a blend, and I typically like single
blend.
malts.
I don't even know what blend means.
Right, but
Salud.
A blend. For those who don't know, a blend is a mix of different whiskeys, okay, put together to make one drink, not a cocktail because it's both whiskeys. I like typically single malt, which is basically one grain that is different grains, one grain, one mash. Well, not one mash, one mash build, and that's typically what I like. I'm not impressed with this. I may use it to make some old fashions or some type of cocktail.
Old fashions, is that bad?
Well, I mean, I love old fashions, but it's just not something that I would buy. I mean, it was relatively inexpensive, but yeah, I'm not a fan of that. There are a lot of good whiskeys out there, and I could spend all day talking about whiskey, to be quite honest with you. If you are a whiskey drinker, or if you're trying to get into whiskey, there are a couple out there that I'm going to recommend that are less than $40. There's one called Balcony, Balcone. I don't know which one it is. It's just the one with the red label. There are different labels, and they have different names, but it's the Balcony with the red label, Balcone. There is an Irish whiskey called the Sexton, Sexton. That you should probably be able to find that for less than $30. Listen, that is some good drinking. Even for the price, they could charge twice as much, and that's how good it is. The final one that I've been talking about, that I've been sipping on, for the past couple of months, is Wolf Moon by Jason Aldean. I think I've been told that Georgia Florida Line also partnered in that company. So Balcony with the red label, the Sexton, and Wolf Moon. Those are three recommendations. That's another thing that we should do. Since we're whiskey, Wakanda, and blerdom, we should talk about the whiskey too. And next time I'll give you
about what?
Pictures.
You said that's another thing we should do sometime, is do what?
Is talk about the whiskeys as well, along with the comic books, as far as recommendations. How we talk about the comic books and stuff, what we recommend. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, this Doers, I'm not a fan of that. That's going to be sitting on the shelf for quite some time. It's probably not going to get touched for a minute. What are you looking up?
All right. Give me 1 second. I'm sharing this live elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
Did you say what are you drinking right now? This that Doers thing? That's what you're drinking?
Yes, I'm drinking the Doers, yes.
Well, if you don't experiment, you never grow, I guess.
You don't know what you like until you try. And I've tried this, and I do not like it. As I pour me another cup or another glass, but it's here, so it is what it is. And that's it.
All right, so you're a Twitter guy. Have you been following the tweets on the aftermath of Wakanda Forever?
Well, yeah, because I've been following the recast T'Challa. I've been very vocal in the recast T'Challa. We knew from a while ago the what they were going to do with the show. Spoiler alert, obviously they killed off the character T'Challa, and at the end they gave him a son, also named T'Challa or whatever. And for a lot of people who are not comic book fans, for them that is sufficient. And yeah, I just yeah, it's just very, very disappointing what they've done with this franchise. This is all on Ryan Coogler and Nate Moore with the acquiescence of Kevin Feige, however you pronounce his name. And
Right.
I'm just not happy with it. And I've said on Twitter and other places that so long as Ryan Coogler is involved with the Black Panther franchise, I won't be supporting it because I don't agree with his vision. I think he did the character a disservice, and I cannot support that, and they won't get my money.
I'm curious as to where they're going to go with the franchise. I did a live recently. I think it was with Richard in our roundtable discussion. I talked about where trying to take some lemons and make lemonade because from my perspective, there were some lemony parts of Wakanda Forever. Um, the movie ends in Haiti,
Which
and
ain't
the most
Wakanda, by the way.
huh
Which ain't Wakanda.
right, but it does leave open the possibility of Brother Voodoo being introduced into the MCU, which I think would be brilliant.
Did they
Um,
mention him or intimate to his existence, or they just were in Haiti?
no, 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 they didn't do any of that. They were just in Haiti.
Okay.
But I'm saying, in terms of the future of the franchise, what would be cool is, you know, I mentioned this before. The Shuri is not a spiritual person. She's a woman of science, and she microwaved her Black Panther abilities by cooking it up in a lab, drinking it, and not going through the whole rituals, which they made a big deal about. Her mother sort of chafed at the fact that she wouldn't go through the funeral rituals in the movie. At the end, they kind of saw her have that stage of guilt, of acceptance, and finally burning her funeral outfit, her funeral gown, um, to show that acceptance. I think it was more of that, just the concept of acceptance and the levels of guilt, or I'm sorry, grief, more so than her outright embracing some spirituality of a sort. She's never met Bast. She doesn't believe in Bast. She doesn't believe in the spiritual realm. And I think the fact that she's in Haiti with the opportunity to meet Brother Voodoo lends itself to a great storyline that comes out of the comics. In the comics run in which she was Black Panther, at the time, there was dissension in Wakanda by the traditional sect of Wakanda called the Distori. It would be interesting if they were to explore that storyline because you think about it, um, the ruler of Wakanda now is apparently M'Baku, who is not a man of science, who is not progressive, who is not interested in Wakanda reaching out to the outer world, and is a highly traditional Wakandan. They don't embrace technology in any of that. It would be interesting that him, as the new leader of Wakanda, sort of gives rise to that sect of the people, which have to date still gone largely unexplored. We don't really know much about the Wakandans themselves, their daily lives, and the way their society works. There hasn't been much exploration of that. So I think the next film would have an opportunity for that by allowing the introduction of the story sect or the traditional sect, or even the Marubi that was introduced in John Ridley's run, um, with issue number 3, um, and explore that dichotomy between the traditional and the super advanced progressive society that Wakanda is.
Here's the
And
thing, though. Here's the
have them
thing.
come to a civil war.
As a fan of this property, I don't really care, to be quite frank with you, about the Wakandans, their everyday lives or anything of that nature. I'm interested in T'Challa, Black Panther, and how Wakanda relates to him. To your point, though, if they're going to talk about Wakanda and Wakandans, have a Disney Plus show, 6 to 8 episodes. Have the Dora, whoever you want, Tosin, who was introduced in the Ridley Run, whatever, and have them do that in a series. That's
Right,
fine.
right, right. I mean,
But in a
well, I'm
movie, I
talking in
want to
a
see
general
T'Challa.
sense. I'm not talking about specifically the next Black Panther film. I'm talking in a general sense. I would like Disney to explore that, and I agree with you. I think a television series on Wakanda would be perfect for that. They've already announced there's going to be an Okoye television series. I think that's a perfect opportunity to do that because Okoye wore the Midnight Angels armor. So that storyline had a little bit of that storyline from Shuri's run as Black Panther as well, where you have that concept of the traditionalists versus the progressives, and Wakanda changing as a result of its leadership.
And I didn't like that aspect of it either, coming from Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't like how I don't like how he introduced the whole upheaval of moving Wakanda away from a monarchy. I don't.
Well, I'm not talking about that aspect of it. I'm talking about the concept of you have this super advanced society that's 10,000 years old that also has 10,000 years of this traditional mystical side that has not been explored. I'm very fascinated by that aspect of the Marvel universe with Doctor Strange and what have you. And I think it's an opportunity to not only introduce Brother Voodoo, but also do some character building and story building using Shuri as a vessel to explore Wakandan mysticism and spirituality. We haven't really met Bast yet, and we don't really know what it means to be a follower of Bast or the rights of how Wakanda was founded, what have you. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. If they introduced the villain who they had in the Coates run, Tetsu, who was a shaman um, with powers over I think it was the earth or something like that, and have him sort of lead the traditional chapter of Wakanda to take inspiration from the fact that they now have this traditional king in M'Baku, and just so like this dissension within Wakanda and that movement. Have Shuri go up against him, have her lose, have her have to go back to Wakanda. I mean, go back to Haiti, and have Brother Voodoo or Doctor Voodoo help her explore her spiritual side, get in contact with Bast,
Yeah, I
explore
disagree with
Wakandan
all of that.
mysticism. Stuff like that fascinates me, and I think it would be a interesting storyline to do in a Disney Plus show. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, she doesn't need to leave. I mean, I understand that that's your position, but for me, knowing how important and advanced and all this other type of stuff that the nation of Wakanda is, she doesn't have to go anywhere to explore any of that. And if anything, she wants to explore it. There's shaman and mystics there in Wakanda, or she can have him come to her. But just the concept or idea that she's got to go outside of her borders to learn anything like that, I just
She's already outside of her borders, and I'm not talking about. I'm talking about having Brother Voodoo help her
I understand. I understand.
understand the concept of spirituality and
I
have her
get it.
try to use that as inspiration to connect with
All that
Bast.
what all I'm saying is all that needs to be done in Wakanda proper, because
Yeah, it could. It could.
by
Hey,
having
hello,
her go
Austin. Welcome, welcome to the show.
elsewhere, it diminishes the importance of the nation and its people. So that's how I look at it. Hello, family. It's good to see you guys. Ready to get into the depth of T'Challa. T'Challa's dead in the MCU, so there's nothing really to get into. Ryan Coogler murdered him, so ain't really nothing to say. And John Ridley is doing his best to, you know, cast him aside and uh, emasculate him. So, yeah.
So you could tell Mark's just a little bit better, just a
I
little.
mean, it's a hard time right now for being a T'Challa fan, considering how he's being treated across several different media. He's been, uh, you know, xed out of his own franchise because Ryan Coogler was in his feelings, and he's being, as I said a moment ago, emasculated in his own title. So yeah, it's just.
So with that being said, have you read the Wakanda is Wakanda title?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's actually it's cool. It's cool. It's all right. Like
I
issue two, was it three? We're on three now.
two has come out.
Two is right, but so it's just we're just on two, right?
Correct.
Okay. The last issue was okay. You know, they were up in space and that fake Mbaku or whatever, that was the main storyline. It was okay. Black Panther Unconquered, I liked better because that was more the way T'Challa was written in that was a lot more in line with how the character has been written for 30 plus years versus what really has been doing. And speaking of that, that's kind of a segue into some of the books that we're going to be talking about, Captain America. And then we're on issue 7 now, but in issue like 3 or 4, Sam Wilson, Sam Wilson, who is Captain America, the symbol of truth, went to Wakanda undercover, and he basically fought T'Challa. The way T'Challa was written in Captain America in one issue was significantly better than the way he's been written in the entirety of the Ridley run. But Captain America, Symbol of Truth, I'm enjoying this issue number 7. It was okay. It was all right. Um, there were some surprises. There were some things and some people shown who I was completely and totally unfamiliar with because I hadn't read the books that they were introduced in. But it was okay. Not too much happened.
There was also a first appearance in this by a soldier called Baltha Balthalibe, Bathalibe, something like that. Anyway, she is a woman who is from the country of Mohanda. There are two main countries that border Wakanda that have been constant antagonists. The most famous one, the one that's been written the most about, is Naganda, who has had issues with Wakanda because they believe that the Alkama Fields, which is in the border between Wakanda and Naganda, that the Wakandans annexed many years ago, really rightfully belong to them, and they believe that Wakanda's growth and resources and wealth largely came from the fact that they annexed the Alkama Fields, um, which they kind of overlooks the whole vibranium mound thing, but fine. Um, and Mahanda is to their north, and that is also, both of these countries are poor countries that are not nearly advanced as Wakanda, and they're bitter about it.
Yeah.
So she's one of the soldiers that country's going through a civil war, and it's more of a South Africa type of country because apartheid only recently was dealt away with.
One of the things that I don't like about this issue, Sam Wilson is a agent of the United States government. He is literally one of the two faces of America. And he goes to a foreign country to enforce basically not his will, but the will of the American government on this nation that did not ask for his help. And as I'm sitting up here reading this, I felt Sam was so very imperialistic that it really, really made me take a second look at him. You know, I can understand if he wanted to go there undercover, don't have the stars and stripes on his uniform, and try to get behind the drama behind issue 6 and 7 without giving any spoilers. I understand that, but as a literal agent of the nation of America, with no sanctioning body like the Avengers, who kind of have carte blanche to go wherever there's trouble, Sam basically just invaded this nation. He did the same thing in Wakanda, and it's somewhat troubling for me to see this black man impose imperialistic views, and I don't even know if he realizes or understands this, but he's invading these countries,
Yeah, he's
for
being very
America.
he's very much being an ugly American right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what the writer is trying to say about that. I don't know if this is intentional. I'm not sure, because a lot of times there are messages that are, subliminal messages in these things. But yeah, I don't know. I'll say this: I don't like it. I didn't like it when he did it in Wakanda a few issues ago, and I don't like it now, especially since he's a solo act. If you were part of a team, and the Avengers or maybe even the Defenders or different groups have permission to go, they're basically essentially a world peacekeeping force. Sam's not. He is the symbol of America, and I just take issue with that.
I take issue with the fact that he's symbol of America. It's just that's just the problem of being Captain America. I mean, there still has not been a sufficient explanation as to why Sam decided to take up the shield again. He did it before. He knew what the experience was like, and ultimately he decided that being Falcon was enough. That was fine. He doesn't need the validation of being Captain America. It's a very well written story, and it's a very good book. Um, but there are problems I have with him being Captain America. It's unnecessary. If if anything, I wish Marvel would take the time to invest in upgrading his Falcon outfit. Put some more tech in it, put some blasters in it or something if you want to give him a power upgrade or something. But making him Captain America is not an upgrade to me.
Especially when he had his own independent identity.
Yes. I
He
mean, he's a
was the
Silver
first.
Age
He
character.
was the first Falcon. So why is he following in the shoes of Steve Rogers?
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah. He's become a legacy character when he was his own unique character for 50, 60 years or however long it was.
Yeah, yeah. He's an original non-legacy black character
Yep.
from the Silver Age, 1969.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, but I mean, the book is good. I enjoy the book. They're just, and as Paul just said, it's well written. There are just certain aspects of it that I personally don't like.
Yeah.
As being an imperialist, basically.
So let me ask you this question. For example, if it was not Captain America symbol of truth, it was simply Falcon symbol of truth. Will the story still have worked?
The story would work, but it wouldn't have the same implication.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, he is not an agent of America. He's not the face of America. And that's basically what he is when he puts on that big old shining star on his chest and that red, white, and blue color scheme. He
Right.
is the face of America. And basically, you have a black man invading an African nation twice in a very short
Two,
period of
two,
time.
two, two African nations. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't dig that. I don't dig that at all. The second book talk about is Eve, Children of the Moon, right here, written by Victor Lavelle.
Who's also writing Sabretooth, um, which is a very good book.
You know, let me say that the premise is somewhat disturbing. Okay, let me back up. This is the second volume. There was volume one, which is about 6 issues that came out last year, and it started off very, very strong. The premise of it is there was a world ending event where basically it was an extinction level event, and humans abandoned the Earth and were in orbiting space station and had a base on the moon. But one of the things that they did was they left this child named Eve down here on the planet. And when you think about it, that's kind of fucked up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have this kid who is supposed to basically save the Earth, right? And the only thing that she has is a robot bear to be her protector and guide. Now, outside of that aspect, the story was good up until the last issue. I didn't like how it concluded. But we're on issue number 2 of Eve, and once again, the writing is really good. It's really solid. Um, it makes sense. Basically, once people reach a certain age, they kind of become zombie-like. And Eve, spoiler alert, wasn't really this particular individual's kid. They were clones. So they created these clones who are people to save Earth, and they abandoned them basically to their own devices. And again, that's a pretty fucked up situation. But the story is well written. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that it maintains its consistency throughout the run, unlike Volume One did. Austin said, "Well, you want to pull back what Austin said? I hate the sidekick characters having to take the mantle of the main characters, especially Sam Wilson. You're right, right. That was completely unnecessary. But you haven't read Eve yet, correct?
No, no, I have the 2 issues. I haven't read it yet. I think my reticence on reading it stems from the final issue of the first run, which was such a
Well, these two
disappointment.
issues are good. They're really good, actually.
I know, I heard you say that, but that I don't understand you. I don't think you understand the level of disappointment I had in that final issue of the
Well,
first run.
yeah, I had the same because it kind of it was not good. It just wasn't good. It was kind. It reminds me of the Matrix 3. You
Yeah,
had these first two excellent Matrix movies, then you get to the third one, and it's like, this is it. Yeah. So
yeah.
I get it. I get it. What about Philadelphia? Are you up to speed on Philadelphia?
I'm still behind on my Philadelphia, although I know that something big happened recently.
Yeah, in this issue, something big happened in the last couple of panels.
Don't give the spoiler alert.
No, of course not. I never do. But it's once again, it's really well done. What's funny though, um, Rodney Barnes has one of the characters talking about kind of current events and real people in Sean P Diddy Combs, and I thought that was pretty funny. And one of the previous issues, Philadelphia is about vampires, and one of the earlier issues when the vampires are taking over Philadelphia, there's a rapper in concert when I think the vampires attacked, and the rapper, the way he was drawn, he reminded me of Drake. He looked like Drake.
Yeah.
So these books infuse real world people into them, and it's done really well.
In fact, the guy who plays, excuse me, the father looks just like what's the name of the actor? What's
Give
the
me
name of
the real movie.
the actor who played the black lawyer on Seinfeld?
Greg Morris.
Craig, is it Greg or Craig Morris?
Greg. I believe it's Greg. I
Yeah.
can't remember what his father's name is. His
His
father.
father his father was the actor on Mission Impossible.
Right. Right.
Right.
But he doesn't
So
look like him to me.
that's exactly what he looks like to me.
No, no. Well, I mean, yeah, he may, but he doesn't look like him to me.
When we interviewed Rodney Barnes, I asked him about it, and I don't think he disagreed that that's what kind of what it looks like.
Okay, Greg Morris is the father. The son is what is his name?
Garrett Morris.
Is that it?
Is that I think that might be it. I don't know.
Let's
I
see.
don't know.
No, Garrett Morris is the dude who was on Saturday Night
Oh,
Live.
that's Saturday Night Live. That's right.
Yeah, I'll find it here in a second because now I'm curious. But go ahead, go ahead.
So the next book I want to talk about um, is Nubia and the Justice League special. This book was really good. I was shout out to Stephanie Williams. Um, this book was dope. This book was dope. For those of you who don't know, Nubia celebrated her 50th birthday this year.
Phil Morris.
Philip Morris, thank you. Nubia celebrated her 50th birthday this year. We had two or three 50th birthdays this year in comics with black
Luke
characters.
Cage,
Luke
her,
Cage, Nubia. I want to say Jon Stewart. If it's not this year, it's next year for Jon Stewart. Um, or maybe it was last year for Jon Stewart. But anyway, definitely Luke Cage and Nubia had their 50th birthdays today, this year. Both original black characters. Arguably, Nubia is not a legacy character in the sense that she was Nubia. I mean, they didn't call her like, they kind of saw her Wonder Woman of the Isles or what have you. But for all intents and purposes, she's her own woman, her own individual character. And for one of DC's first black superheroes, she's not the first one, but she's one of them. She has gotten very little, space and time in comics. I
until
mean,
recently.
there's not a whole lot of books that she's in. And then you have the problem with DC is that they keep reinventing their universes. So the original Nubia that was introduced in Wonder Woman 204, 204, 205, 206, 204 is she no longer exists. She died in one of the crises, or along with everyone else. And the next Wonder Woman that showed up, which went by New apostrophe Bia, is like New Bia. She's gone too when that universe folded. So the one that we have presently, the one you see on your screen, she was actually introduced. Richard told me in Wonder Woman 75. And that's the present iteration of Nubia. And and to DC's credit, they spent the last few years with rebuilding her origin, her background, and who she is.
Fully fleshing out the character.
Fully fleshing out the character. They started that in really, really, truly in Future State, Wonder Woman, and have continued that to these iterations. And she's a dope character. She's a dope character with a lot of potential. I think the only difference between her and Diana in terms of power sets is she doesn't fly. At least they haven't shown her fly.
Right. And not in
But
this book. She definitely wasn't flying.
yeah, yeah. But this book was interesting because an argument can be made. In essence, she joins the Justice League. I mean, spoiler alert. I mean, it says it on the cover. But the storyline is that she's meeting with each of the Justice League members and going on various missions with them. And it almost seems, and they mentioned this several times, she's going through like a trial. They're checking her out to see if she's worthy of being a Justice League member. One could interpret that on a surface level as her seeking, for all intents and purposes, white validation as a character. That's a pretty obvious argument that could be made. But if you dig a little deeper and you notice that much of the storyline involves her inner thoughts, her thought balloons, and you realize something else is going on. She never questions whether or not she is worthy of being on the Justice League. That's never crossed her mind. From her perspective, not at all. The questions that's going through her mind is actually evaluating the Justice League to see if they're worthy of her. If anything, she plays things very close to the vest. She's a very pragmatic individual. It kind of reminds me a little bit of why T'Challa, the Black Panther, joined the Avengers, in which he said, I joined the Avengers because I kind of wanted to evaluate the level of threat that you may pose to Wakanda. Because you're the most powerful heroes on Earth. You're a threat. I need to check you out. And I sort of got a little bit, from my perspective, I got that inkling from Nubia, is that she's really evaluating the Justice League and taking their measure. To see not only if they're worthy of her, but just kind of checking to see what type of people they are and what type of threats they are and what their power sets are, because she was very familiar with their power sets. And she doesn't say much. There's lots of if you notice in the book, the Justice League members are all talking about her and talking to her, but she doesn't really say much back to them that reveals much about herself. So I thought that was an interesting writing take on it.
The book was well written. I didn't like, first and foremost, I don't think that Nubia should join the Justice League. She's the queen of the Amazons. And far too often in comics, you have these monarchs who leave their kingdoms and their people that they are tasked to rule to go gallivanting around with the super team. You've got Namor, Thor, T'Challa over in Marvel, and in DC, you've got Black Adam, Hippolyta, um, and who else? Arthur, Aquaman. Aquaman. They left their kingdoms to go be full time with the Justice League, and we've been there, done that. I don't feel that she needs to do that. Now, I also didn't like how everybody was fawning over Nubia. Understand that these people have worked alongside Diana, aka Wonder Woman, for years. And although Nubia isn't a quote unquote legacy character, she's equivalent to Wonder Woman. So why are you treating her as more special than Diana? Who's literally come back from the dead now. I didn't like that aspect of the book, but again, I did like how it was written. I like how Black Adam was written because to me that's how that character is supposed to be done, unlike the way he's been portrayed in his own book. So I will say I like that aspect of it. But it was a solid read. There were certain aspects that I just wasn't a fan of, and I definitely don't feel or think that she should join the Justice League. There's no
Now, is
reason
the
for
Justice
it.
League coming back? I mean, there's no Justice League book at the moment. They're still doing this Dark Crisis storyline,
Yeah,
right?
the Dark Crisis is going to be over before too long.
I think they have
I saw
one issue left.
probably like two issues, I think. Um, Kal El has returned to Earth from War World, and so I'm not quite sure how these timelines stack up, but it's clear that they will be coming back, to me at least. And this book right here, the Nubia and the Justice League, I mean, it's damn near setting it up. So I just don't want her to be part of a group. I want her to be doing her own thing and having her own adventures, and perhaps having her own team. Maybe not just of Amazons, but other characters that they can introduce. Also, as an aside, there's there's some interactions between Nubia and Black Adam in this book, and something that I thought about was if the two of them had kids, their kids would be extremely powerful. I would that's a direction where I wish they would take it, is, her hooking up with him and they have kids together. That I would like, because she was showing a lot of admiration for Black Adam, and I think that admiration could turn to, if not love, definitely lust. So,
Well, Io might have her girlfriend. Io might have some problems with that.
I mean, and that's fine, but let's not act like there haven't been plenty of lesbians out there who also, get dick on the side. All
Oh,
right,
language, man. Come on.
whatever. I said fuck earlier. You didn't say shit. Dick.
I didn't think you would. All right. Anyway, so that takes care of that.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. So in DC, they're not mutants. If they're born with powers, they're what? What are they in DC?
Metas.
Metas. So how do they distinguish the power of the metas in DC? Because over in Marvel, as everybody knows, there are mutants who are Omega level, extremely, extremely strong. Do they have such designation over in DC?
If they do, I'm not familiar with it. I've never seen it before.
Who what type of people have been born with their powers who are not who are just regular earthlings? Not Atlanteans, not Kryptonians, not Amazonians. Who? Who?
They just call them metas.
No, no, I understand that, but I'm asking who has been born with their powers, who
Oh,
hasn't achieved them. Like, okay, Black Canary, was she born with those powers? Do you know?
yeah. I don't know much about Black Canary.
Yeah, I don't either. If anybody's watching and they know the answer to that, please answer. Because when you think about the main Justice League folks, A, most of them are foreign. B, they were born with their powers outside the confines of Earth. They're not just regular humans. Arthur is Atlantean. John Jones is a Martian, Kal-El, Kryptonian, etc., etc. I'm sitting up here trying to think who in DC was born with their powers and are really
Well,
strong.
Aquaman, as you
Well,
mentioned,
like I said,
would be
he's an
considered.
Atlantean. He's a different race,
Yeah, but he's a hybrid. So
but he's still
much like Namor, he's kind of a mutant because Atlantean and human had a child.
right, right. But outside of that, I'm talking about regular old walking the earth humans. What walking the earth humans have powers that they've had since they were kids? Flash, accident, right? Billy Batson, magic. Green Arrow, very very skilled, practice. Who else? Green Lantern, obviously, a ring. Hawk Girl, Hawk Man, Thanagarians. Think about that for a second. What superheroes in DC were born with their powers? And even think about,
Um,
the Teen Titans as an example. You've got Robin, highly trained. You've got Starfire, alien.
Alien,
You've got Cyborg. Um,
Beast Boy was
Great
an accident.
Beast Boy was, an accident. Uh, what's her name? Raven. She's a hybrid. She's another hybrid, right?
So she would fall into the meta definition.
Well, I mean, she's a meta, but again, she's not just a regular old human being. That's the point I'm getting at.
That's a good, interesting question in the DC universe. I mean, you and I are Marvel guys, so our knowledge of DVC is a lot more limited.
Well, but here's
Um,
the thing, though. Yes, you're right, but I've been reading over the past 3 or 4 years a lot more DC books than I ever have in my life, and just going through my mental rolodex of the heroes that are over in DC.
yeah,
That leads to that question. I mean, hell, we used to watch, Young Justice. We see the heroes that are there, the Super Friends back in the day. It seems to me that it's rare in DC that the superhero characters are individuals who have their powers since birth as being just straight up regular humans.
yeah,
Even Raven, she's a hybrid. She's the half daughter of Trigon. You know what I'm saying? So I can't think of anybody who's just a regular old straight human being who got their powers through birth. Just sit back and think about that.
I
Think about
did.
all the
I
teams
don't know.
and all the heroes. I don't think that's a thing in DC.
Yeah,
You know,
you might be right.
I mean, you got Blue Beetle. He's got the Scarab. You've got the Red Tornado. He's a
Android.
machine. Um, what's her name? Zatanna and Zatara. They're magicians, so that's a skill. Now, I think part of it may be that they are descended from Atlantis. Maybe, you know,
Oh, you
are
got
they
it.
homo? Oh, they're magi, magicians. Because I may be conflating what I saw in Young Justice with what's happening in the comic books. As an aside, if you've not watched the last season of Young Justice, you are missing out. Kevin Grievous wrote a couple of episodes, and the way that they did it in the Young Justice cartoon was spectacular. Vandal Savage, for those who don't know, is one of the oldest individuals roaming the earth outside of like Olympian gods and things of that nature. He was basically a Cro-Magnon man who was imbued with the powers of a meteor, which made him basically immortal. And in the Young Justice cartoon, he is the father, or he he is the ancestor of the god Nabu, who is in the helm that Doctor Fate wears. He's also the father, I want to say, of Arian, who is, the great wizard king of DC's Atlantis. And the way they tie that all up as stemming from Vandal Savage, it was just really really good. It was really really brilliant. I want to say episodes in the middle. It's in the middle, like episodes 6 through 10, something like that. You'll find it. It's very 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 well written. But going back to my question, Paul, I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone either.
That's crazy. Are there any questions that people have asked?
Hey, what's up, James Thompson? How you doing, man?
What's going on?
Just a guy on
Black
A
Lightning Daughters. Okay, yes, good. Thank you. Yes, yes. So they would be considered mutants. Well, what we would call mutants over in Marvel.
metas. Yeah, they'd be considered metas.
Yes. Okay. So Black Lightning's daughters. Yes. That's two. Who else? And how did Jefferson Pierce get his powers? Because that's something I
That
don't
would
know.
also mean that Flash's daughter from the alternate universe
Right.
also
Okay.
is a meta.
Pulse. Pulse would be. Yeah. hmm But how did Black Lightning get his powers? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't either.
I want to say it was a meta, but then I keep thinking about the Black Lightning television show in which he got his powers as part of that experiment.
Right. 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 And what's crazy is I have several issues of Volume One of Black Lightning.
Just a guy in
Jade,
A
daughter
says
of the
Jade, daughter
original,
of the original Green
and
Lantern,
right, Scott. What's his name? Scott.
Alan Scott,
Alan Scott. He's got a daughter and a son, and both
and
of
a
them
son.
have powers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those two. So we've got five.
So it does happen, but it seems to be
Rare.
progeny of existing superheroes.
Yeah. Right. Hawk and Dove. How did they get their powers? Do you know?
They have powers.
I think they're a little bit strong, especially Hawk. I'm not sure. And then there's that chick from Brazil who can, the green one, I think. Because remember them from Justice League Unlimited? There were two of them who always were together. The chick who turned into Green Fire, and then the other chick. I can't remember. I don't remember her name. She wasn't that big a deal, but yeah, it just seems rare, and I just sitting here thinking about it. That seems very interesting to me. That you've got all these superheroes in DC, most of whom were not born with their abilities. Fire and Ice, yes, thank you. Fire and Ice. Which one was from Brazil? I think it was Fire, the green one. Yeah, I think she was from Brazil. So Batman was born rich in the Justice League movie. He told Flash that was his super. Batman has white privilege, and yes, he was born with that. So I mean, is it a superpower?
I would say so.
It's not a superpower, but it is definitely an ability. So yeah, fire.
Just a guy in the A says Fire is the one who's from Brazil, I guess.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Um, yeah, I just just sitting here thinking about it. I just found that was interesting. Earlier, you were mentioning some Star Wars books that you like.
No, it was Star Trek.
Star
Star
Trek. I'm
Trek.
sorry. Star Trek.
So if I'm a big Star Trek guy. Grew up on Star Trek, and my favorite Star Trek series of all time is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, with the first black captain, Benjamin Sisko.
Played by the great Avery
Interesting,
Brooks.
played by the great Avery Brooks of Hawk fame, Man Called Hawk fame. Interesting trivia tip, what do you call it? Not a fun fact. Um, Black characters are the only ones that have to earn their captaincy in the Star Trek universe for some reason. because when Ben Cisco, when the show started, Deep Space Nine, he was a commander of a space station, not a captain. And by season 3, I believe he got promoted to captain. In Star Trek, the other show where there's a black lead is Star Trek Discovery, where um, the character played by Sonequa Martin Green.
Michael Burnham.
Um, what'd you say?
Michael Burnham.
Yeah, Michael Burnham was a commander who got demoted and had no rank and worked her way back up the ranks. And by season 3, she became a captain or whatever. It's just weird that in both instances, black characters have to earn their captaincies on the show. But I
Versus
digress.
the like when you see the other captains, they are already captains, like
They're
Captain
already
Janeway,
captains. Yeah, they're
Captain
the only ones
Kirk,
that had to
blah blah
earn
blah.
their
Yep.
captaincy. Um, just an interesting point. I'm not making any aspersions or criticisms, just interesting fact. Anyway, Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek show of all time. But that series ended with Benjamin Sisko ascending or going into the realm of the prophets. If you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. And he was basically gone. He from existence. He ascended to a higher realm, so to speak, and that's how the show ended. And Star Trek continued with other various shows and movies and properties, and no one's ever known what's happened to Ben Sisko. So this comic book takes place 3 years after that last episode on Deep Space Nine, and Ben Sisko has returned to the galaxy from his higher realm plane of existence, or what have you. And he has been tasked with, Starfleet evaluated him, and they said he's basically normal. But he's been tasked with the job of tracking down these aliens that are basically killing these higher ascended races. And so he assembles this crew on this advanced ship, which is kind of a throwback ship, experimental ship. And he takes a hodgepodge of different characters from different parts of the Star Trek universe. His chief engineer is Scotty.
Mm.
And if you watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you know that the original Scotty from the original Star Trek show was put in basically in suspended animation in a transporter buffer for like 100 years or whatever, 50 years, and is in what's quote unquote the modern Star Trek era. And so he's his chief engineer. His first officer is Data. His chief medical officer is Dr. Crusher. His helmsman, and both those characters from Next Generation. So you have the original series, Scotty. You have from Next Generation, Data and Dr. Crusher. From Star Trek Voyager, he has Tom Paris as his helmsman. So that's from Voyager. And from Deep Space Nine and also Next Generation, he has Worf.
Oh, for those who don't know the Star Trek lore, Deep Space Nine and Star Trek, the Next Generation, take place at the same time.
Yeah.
For those who don't know.
Yeah. Kind of, sort of. There's some overlap with Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and there's overlap between Deep Space Nine and Voyager. So it was really interesting. It's this crew is tasked with finding these aliens. Very well written story. It's very Star Trekky, which I enjoy. Um, they're exploring the human condition. They're going into Star Trek lore by checking out all these characters you've seen over all these various series. If you're a Star Trek fan, you would probably enjoy this book because it's a hodgepodge homage to the Star Trek universe. Dope
Basically,
books. Star Trek.
if you've watched the shows, basically what Paul is saying is there are characters that you've seen across different properties put together in one
In
group.
one series. Yeah, there's a
Right.
little bit something for everybody.
Have you been watching Andor?
Oh, yes.
Andor, listen, I for me of the Disney Plus Star Trek, Star Wars shows, The Mandalorian was the best, but I think that Andor has probably taken that top spot for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a huge espionage fan. That's why Captain America: Winter Soldier is top three MCU movies of all time to me because of the espionage aspect of it. That's what I like about Andor. It is not your typical Star Wars lightsabers, Jedi, you know, Star Wars battles type of show. It's none of that. It's down and gritty realism,
Right.
and it is so very good. If you're wanting a lot of action, this ain't gonna be the show for you.
Right.
I'm just gonna be straight with you. But if you like something that makes you think and you can try to relate it to real world uprisings and against fascist regimes, this is definitely the show for you. And um, oh god,
Yeah.
Skarsgård, Skarsgård, man, that
The
dude,
acting on the show from everyone is
yeah,
impeccable, but
yeah.
Skarsgård is really good.
Skarsgård, he deserves an Emmy for his role
Yeah.
in this show. It won't happen, but he gives a monologue in episode maybe 8 or 9 that's like 2 or 3 minutes long. It is just gritty and powerful. This show is top notch. I would say
Yeah.
Mandalorian is
For
probably
those
number
of
two
you who haven't watched the show, if you watch the movie Star Wars Rogue One,
which
this
was
would be
probably
in
the
essence
best.
a prequel to that movie. Um, in that movie, you got introduced to the character of Cassian Andor, who's a rebel fighter, hardened rebel fighter, someone who you gather from the movie has been through a lot and has been with the rebellion probably almost from the very outset, and has done things that he's had to regret for the sake of the rebellion and overturning tyranny. So this story in Andor is about how did he get there, what
Right,
made him what he was, what gave him that long stare that he had in Rogue One. But it's also a larger story of the concept of tyranny and uprising and standing against tyranny. How does a revolution begin? When I was in college, I was a political science major, and one of the courses I took was revolutions in the modern world. And it's interesting to see how revolutions begin at the grassroots level in these little pockets. It's not like an organized effort. It's kind of like, the people have their thoughts, they start to segregate themselves, they feel segregated, they segregate themselves further, they start to develop their own communities because they've been cut off and feel that they've been cut off by the larger government, and they foster their own sense of self and how it develops from there. And you see all of that in this series that sort of bubbles into not a full blown rebellion, but like a micro rebellion in this pocket sized world. And what's interesting is when you look at the first episode and the last episode, there's like a lot of stuff that happens. It almost seems like, how many episodes is this? 10 episodes?
10.
It seems longer than that, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Because of the amount of stuff they covered.
yeah.
I mean, I don't feel dissatisfied in the show at all
Right.
because it covered so much in one season. And the episodes is, an hour each, less than an hour.
In the timeline of the Star Wars universe, as we all know, in our real world, Star Wars started back in the 70s with Chapter 4, A New Hope. That was the very first Star Wars movie ever. Rogue One, which came out around 2014, 2015, somewhere like that. Rogue One leads immediately into A New Hope.
Yeah,
So this
episode 4.
series, for how many ever seasons it will go, leads up to Rogue One, which leads into Chapter 4.
So in essence,
So
it takes place between episode 3, Revenge of the Sith,
yeah,
and Star Wars Rogue One, which is right before
it is
episode 4.
after Order 66. It's after the Emperor has won and has basically taken over the galaxy. This takes place after that.
What's interesting is the possibility. I mean, Darth Vader's out there. It'd be interesting to see if Darth Vader or any of
You
the
know what? I don't need to see him. I mean, you're right, but I don't need to see him. I like the show. the way it is, talking about everything and people other than him.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you're looking for a show that has a bunch of Jedi and Sith and lightsabers, this
this
isn't
ain't
that
it.
show.
This ain't it.
This ain't that show. I mean, and you don't miss it. You don't
Not
miss
at
it at
all.
all. It stands alone. If it didn't have the label of Star Wars, it would still be a dope show that people would just call a really dope sci-fi espionage type show.
Right. Just said in
You
a
could relabel it
galaxy
something
far,
else, and
far
people
away.
would still dig it, even though it's not Star Wars.
Right. Have you seen Wednesday on Netflix?
My family has been binge watching that show all week.
That
Yeah.
show is phenomenal. Wednesday on
Oddly enough,
Netflix.
it is a very, very, very good show.
Wednesday on Netflix for me, Black Siskel and Ebert, gets a 10 out of 10. That show was perfect. That show
Yeah.
was really,
Yeah.
really, really good.
It really was good,
The
honestly.
young lady who plays Wednesday Addams, basically the show is based on the Addams family mythology that came out in the 60s. And the show focuses on the daughter, Wednesday. She's sent off to a private school due to a mishap that she had at her old school. And this school
Nevermore.
happens to be where her mother and father met. And so she's going to their alma mater. The show is so very well written and the acting is good. Now, initially during episode 1, I took issue with the fact that the two main assholes in the show were black folks. The queen bee of the school is this black girl named Bianca who's extremely attractive. And one of the townies or normies is this black dude who is the son of the mayor. Both of them initially start off as antagonists to Wednesday, which I didn't like because if you're familiar, Tim Burton doesn't. Tim Burton directs this show. Okay, when you look at the history of Tim Burton movies, rarely, if ever, does he have black actors in his properties. Sit
Well,
back and think. No, sit back and think about it. The only two that immediately come to mind
only one
are
really.
Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent in the first
Yeah.
Batman movie, and Jim Brown as whatever character he played in When Mars Attacks, and I guess Ray J was in that as well. Okay, so
Hey,
you got,
frustrated fans, better late than never, man.
yep. So you've got Ray J and his little brother and Jim Brown in Mars Attacks. You've got Billy D. Williams in Batman, but rarely do you see black folks in Tim Burton properties. So
It's interesting.
with
It's
that in
interesting you should
mind,
say that because
the fact that
Tim
you
Burton
made in
actually
episode 1, you
wanted to
had
make
the main
Batman
antagonist,
Returns
you had
with
the
one
main
of the
hold on,
Wayans
you had the
brothers
main antagonist being black
as
folks.
Robin.
It didn't make sense at all. It didn't make sense, but without giving spoilers, my attitude towards those two characters changed as the show went on. But it is extremely, extremely good. It's, yeah.
What I was trying to point out is Tim Burton actually wanted one of the Wayans brothers to be Marlon Wayans to be Robin in Batman Returns.
Yeah, but he wasn't. So regardless of what
I
he
think the
wanted,
studio nixed that or something like that. It's
regardless,
interesting. Marlon Wayans still gets residual checks from the fact that he was supposed to play Robin in Batman Returns.
and that's fine. But look at all the other works that Tim Burton put together.
He hasn't had that much works, honestly.
I'm sorry.
He hasn't had that many works. But yes, you're right. There hasn't been that many
He
black
has.
people in there.
Edward Scissorhands. There's not a black face in that movie that I can recall. When you look at Sweeney Todd, there's not a black face in that movie, and so on and so forth. So he doesn't have a large history of working with black actors, and I could probably say the same thing for Martin Scorsese outside of Sam Jackson.
That's
Same
true.
thing. So, but yeah, Wednesday, if you've got access to Netflix, highly, highly recommend Wednesday.
Well, next book I want to talk about is a book I told Marc about this week called Batman Gotham Knights Gilded City. What's interesting about this is a book that's actually two stories. The first main story, the story A, is tied into the Gotham Knights video game. I could care less about that. I actually didn't read that. What I'm interested in is the backup story, so to speak, that's written by writer Evan Narcisse, who's known for, um, most famously for me and Mark, he was the writer of Rise of the Black Panther,
which was very
um,
good.
which is excellent. And he's written some other Black Panther stuff too. I think he's written some books um, as well. He's really responsible for developing. He's Marvel's go-to guy for really developing the background of the Black Panther and Wakanda, what have you. But in this story, as you see in the cover, on the left you see Batman. On the right you see a character called the Runaway. Um, this story talks about the family of Lucius Fox, the Fox family, and their history in Gotham dating back to pre-Civil War. The backup story takes place in 1847 in Old Gotham. And in that story, that character you see on the screen there, the Runaway, he protects um, emancipated slaves, enslaved peoples, people that have gained their freedom from enslavement. Many times, as I'm sure many of you know, historically speaking, prior to the Civil War, if you were enslaved, or just actually, it doesn't matter if you're enslaved or free or what have you, if you were north of the Mason Dixon line, you were subject to being kidnapped and brought down south and put into slavery. I mean, look at the story 12 Years a Slave. And so this was very perilous for emancipated peoples, people that had their papers, so to speak, their emancipation papers, who run the risk of being kidnapped by these roving kidnappers and brought to the South and put into enslavement. And so the Runaway, who was assumably, they haven't really gone into detail on that yet, has assumably an ex-slave himself, protects these people. He's like the vigilante of the emancipated Black people. And one of the people that he's protected is, her last name is Fox, assumably one of Lucius Fox's predecessors. Um, so I mean, a dope story, dope concept, and I highly recommend it.
The story is twofold, where you have Batman and the Bat family fighting crime in modern day, and then there are flashbacks to the 1800s and the story that Paul is talking about. That's why you see the bifurcated cover with the two faces on it. You've got Bruce Wayne on the left, then you got the dude from the 1800s on the right. It's a really good story. He told me about it this week. I bought it on Wednesday. I guess there are two issues that are out because I have issues one and two. So I definitely encourage
One
and
of the
recommend it.
one of the reasons why this is also kind of cool is because of an upcoming book that's coming out. Give me 1 second. Find it. I can't ever find stuff when I'm looking for it. It's a pain in the butt. Let me try this. So, if you're not familiar, um, oh geez, I got an error. If you're not familiar, there's a book called I Am Batman that stars Jace Fox, who is the son of one of the sons of Lucius Fox. And in that story, Jace Fox is the new Batman of New York. Um, and it really, the Fox family is really the stars of the show. Let me see if I can switch screens here. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm trying to find all this on the fly. So there's the older son Luke Fox, who is Batwing. There's Jace Fox, who's now Batman of New York, and they also have a younger sister Tiffany, who's going to be sort of a sidekick, so to speak, to her brother Jace. And there's an upcoming with you guys. I just found it finally. This is I Am Batman number 18. This isn't colored in yet, but if you can see, you have Luke Fox, the brother, the older brother there, from the same
You keep going out, dude.
family as. So I'm very excited for that. And I like the fact that they're building up the background of the Fox family. One of the things I always talk about is that there's not too much of representation of black superhero families in comics. And DC has set the Foxes up to be that premier black superhero family. The Foxes have billions now. They basically got Bruce Wayne's billions of dollars. They're the richest family, one of the richest families in Gotham, and the kids are all superheroes, or all but one. So I'm looking forward to that, developing that further.
Speaking of the whole concept of black families, which leads to black love, this is going back to how we started this conversation off, talking about T'Challa and what Ryan Coogler did by killing off T'Challa, which is he basically eliminated
I thought you didn't want to talk about that anymore.
he basically eliminated the idea of T'Challa and Storm being together. And that's one of the things that folks have been talking about for years, ever since Black Panther 1.
Well,
Fan
T'Challa's
casting,
senior anyway.
fan casting who's going to play Storm opposite T'Challa. And now, with the death of the character, none of that even matters at this point. It's
Of
just,
course, it matters. He's been recasted as his son TJ.
yeah. And George W. Bush is the same as George H.W. Bush.
They're
You don't
absolutely the
believe that.
same guy.
Paul doesn't really believe that. He's just being facetious. And anybody who says that are people who do not read comic books, and they don't understand the separation of an actor who was Chadwick Boseman and the character that he played, which is T'Challa. And this bastard child in Haiti is not T'Challa, even though he may have the exact same name, which he doesn't. But he's not the real T'Challa. He is the son of T'Challa, allegedly. When we say, those of us who like and love this character, when we say T'Challa, we mean the son of T'Chaka, brother of Shuri, the individual who defeated the Fantastic Four, joined the Avengers, repelled the Skrull invasion of his nation. That's who we mean, not whatever the hell Ryan Coogler is trying to do with this kid, because Ryan didn't go to therapy to deal with his grief. So yeah, we're not going to have that storyline. That's one of the most disappointing things about this, because when you think about it, Steve Rogers got to go back in time and have his love story with Peggy. Tony Stark had his love story and built a family with Pepper. Um, Even Doctor Strange had his love affair with what's her name? Rachel McAdams is the actress. I just don't remember the character's name right now. But he had that love story. And people may say, well, Mark, T'Challa had his love story with the kid in Black Panther 1. Well, yeah, he did, but she ends up being a villain. Okay, in the comic books, Nakia is a villain who was infatuated with T'Challa. So, Ryan has changed that. And what does he do? He creates this bastard child who's not even born in Wakanda. He is not Wakandan. He is a Haitian. So this is stupid. It's really
Well, how do
stupid.
you know he's not a Skrull?
It's a stupid concept. They should have just recast the character and been done with it. Now that Bob Iger has taken back over, hopefully he snaps Kevin Feige in line and tells him what needs to happen with these properties, because this is just
Because what is TJ? Bastards!
For those who don't know, if you did not watch House of the Dragon, which was a Game of Thrones prequel, you are missing out. That that scene was hilarious. It was his last scene, but it was absolutely hilarious. Um, Game of Thrones is probably one of the outside of season 8. Game of Thrones is probably one of the best series ever. The world building, the intrigue, it was just a phenomenal series. House of the Dragon, there's no diminishing in House of the Dragon than what happened in Game of Thrones. Um, it was really really good, and they finally introduced black characters in Westeros from the outset, unlike what they did in Game of Thrones. Like we didn't see black characters in Game of Thrones until like season 3.
Valerians at that. Frustrated Fan Sports Show says, what is wild is that when white fans don't like something, MCU adjusts so quickly, but when black fans are upset about the death of T'Challa and the death of the love with Storm, sucks.
Here's the issue: most of the people who watch the MCU movies are not comic book fans. So they don't have the deep love of these characters that we do. They don't know about their history, they don't know about the story of these characters. So all they have to go by is what's on the screen. And many of them, because they don't have this knowledge of the character of T'Challa, they associate him with Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman was an actor. He was not the character. So just because Chadwick died, God rest his soul, it does not mean that the character needed to die. And the MCU fans, don't grasp that concept. I'm very concerned about who's going to be leading MCU for the future. It was supposed to have been Black Panther, right? I
Yeah,
think they were setting it up so he could be, one of
the
the
leader of
leads
the new
of the
Avengers.
Avengers. You
Yeah.
know, and here's another thing that galls me to no end is that Richard Hurt, is it Richard Hurt?
William Hurt.
William Hurt. William Hurt, who played Thunderbolt Ross from the very beginning of the MCU, died over the summer. Within 3 months now, they decided that they were going to recast his role. Why? Because they wanted his character of Thunderbolt Ross to be in future projects so he could be the Red Hulk. Those in charge recognize the importance of the character of Thunderbolt Ross. It is unfortunate that Nate Moore, who needs to be fired as a producer, does not recognize the importance of T'Challa to the MCU. I'm going to say it again.
Can producers be fired?
Yeah, yeah. Nate Moore, who is the producer of Black Panther, needs to be fired. He does not need to have anything whatsoever to do with these properties. He is on record saying that he doesn't want writers or directors who have knowledge of the source material, which makes no sense. Somebody just said the Black Panther could still lead as Shuri. Shuri has never been a member of the Avengers. Yes, she could, but that is not what I, as a fan of these characters, want to see. Shuri is great or whatever, but we did not get a full telling of T'Challa's story, not like what the other characters did. Okay?
All fans of the character Black Panther T'Challa would agree with Austin that they would rather it be T'Challa than Shuri.
Right. We are fans of that character. Everyone else is ancillary to T'Challa. Okay? Understand, Shuri, what book was Shuri introduced into? Where was she created? In the Black Panther title, where T'Challa was the main focus. If One of the things that we've been saying for months now to her blue in the face is that if T'Challa had had a full narrative arc, the way that Tony did, the way that Steve did, the way that Thor is, and it seems that Doctor Strange is, there would not be a recast T'Challa moment. If he had had at least two solo movies and appeared in 4 or 5 Avengers team up movies where he had a significant role, not just a brief cameo, there wouldn't be a recast T'Challa movement. It would be fine to move on to Shuri. Okay? It, no, I don't want to see Shuri as a member of the Avengers. Okay?
Rico asks, what story was Namor introduced as Aztec?
He wasn't. That was a creation of the movies. It was a creation of the MCU. Namor is a hybrid of a blue Atlantean mom and a white American male. Okay, this Aztec nonsense was something that was created by Ryan Coogler for the sense of inclusion. So, you know,
I think Rico's point is it's the movies. They can do whatever they want.
Well, we know that they can do whatever they want, but as these properties are based on things that have come before. You know, when they have the Civil War storyline, that is based on something that came before. And yes, they can take it in different directions, but you know, they've strayed so far away unnecessarily, especially when it comes to the killing off of T'Challa, the very first black superhero in comics, in modern comics.
To give you an example, Rico, imagine Blade 3. Imagine if the original version of Blade 3 that Wesley Snipes objected to had proceeded, and Hannibal King became the new vampire slayer. Would you have been happy with that? I don't think the answer would be yes, because your guy, Blade, would have been sidelined for the promulgation of another character who has not had the center stage of being the vampire slayer. That's how Black Panther fans feel about having someone else other than T'Challa be the Black Panther and the center of that franchise.
And let me nip this in the bud too. The whole concept of people wanting T'Challa recast being rooted in misogyny is stupid and it's lazy. And it comes from people who don't read comic books and don't understand comic book history. Okay. Paul and I both are the same age roughly. And I've been reading comic books for literally 40 years. Okay. The Black Panther that I've been reading about for all of that time has been T'Challa. That's who I want to see. Okay. I have no issue with Shuri being the Black Panther at some point. Yes, we know in Wakanda Forever she is now, but that should not have happened.
Okay? Yeah, and to your point, Rico, you said Shuri was actually the Black Panther in comics. You're absolutely right. Shuri was Black Panther in comics. Was
T'Challa dead when Shuri became the Black Panther?
Yes. Yeah, T'Challa was never dead when Shuri was Black Panther. Killing him was unnecessary. So if you're saying, well, if you shouldn't be mad about this because in the comics, Shuri was Black Panther. Well, in the comics, if we're following the comics, T'Challa wasn't dead, didn't die as a result of her being Black Panther. Both times, actually.
One of the things that I said initially was that, you know, I understood that there may be people who did not want to see the role recast immediately. I disagree with that. Personally, I think it should have been recast immediately. But fine, if they didn't want to do that. I've said this in this space before. And that is, if you wanted to have Black Panther 2 to be Shuri centric, I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Rico's saying, I'm only responding to your Blade example. That's all.
Okay.
Well, the example I was giving was the fact of taking characters from the comics and re-juxtaposing them into differing roles that they didn't previously have. Hannibal King does exist in the comics. You know that better than I do. But making him the lead vampire hunter is inconsistent with what you see in the comics. Making Shuri the lead Black Panther who joins the Avengers and leads the Avengers and does the Secret Wars storyline and goes up against Kang. None of that happened in the comics. So you're replacing stories and roles that Black Panther had in the comics with Shuri.
Right.
If you want to put Shuri in the MCU, Shuri has her comics and roles where she's Black Panther and stories where she has been Black Panther they can go explore. But I've checked the roster for Phase 5 and Phase 6. None of those mention anything about any of the storylines, as far as I can tell.
Okay. As I was saying a second ago, when it comes to Black Panther and Black Panther 2, right? You could have had T'Challa injured in
He was never
uniform
played in the
and
comics, and sure, he was never an Avenger, right? Sure, he was never an Avenger.
can I go?
Plus, MCU has been retconning a lot of characters. Well, Rico, you can't have it both ways. You can't argue that Shuri was Black Panther in comics, so you should be happy with that because they're just following the comics. Then say the MCU has been retconning a lot of characters. You're being inconsistent. Those are two different arguments that go against each other. It's one or the other. You're either taking the position that the MCU should follow the comics, or taking the position that the MCU is its own thing. It's all just it has nothing to do with the comics and just do whatever. In which case, a lot of people who are comic book fans are going to be upset because heretofore that has not happened. I'm not putting I'm not putting words in your mouth, brothers. Those are the two arguments you just made, man. What's up, Mike? What's up, Derek? How you guys doing? Mark, what were you saying?
Basically, I was saying that the idea that recast T'Challa is rooted in misogyny is a stupid fucking argument. It has
Language.
it was a stupid fucking argument. It has nothing to do with hating women. It has nothing to do with hating Shuri as a character. It has everything to do with the character of T'Challa not having a full narrative arc. Okay? If T'Challa had had a full narrative arc, that would be fine. They could have had Shuri be front and center in BP2, have T'Challa injured, have her seeking the revenge like she did in Volume 4 in Claws of the Panther. It could have even been Namor that she went against, okay? Then at the end of the movie, you have T'Challa recuperate from his injuries, and it's the new actor. It gives a whole 2.5 hour movie that is Shuri centric and people dealing with the idea that Chadwick Boseman is no longer that character. Then you have the new actor in the role of T'Challa for a brief after credit scene, and then he goes forward in other properties before you eventually make your way to BP3. That's what I was saying. Either you could have either done that or easily said it during the blip. And every emotional note from what I've heard about the movie that I have not and will not see could have still been met if it was just set during that 5 year time period while everybody was gone.
Frustrated Fan Sports Show says, I mean, they stole Miles Morales' Spider-Man personality and gave it to the now Peter Parker just because they recon the MCU doesn't mean it's right.
I won't agree that they gave. I don't agree that Tom Holland has Miles Morales' personality. I don't know if I would agree with
that. But Miles definitely has Static's personality.
Right. You're gonna right.
Miles is short for milestone. Slap in the face.
Oh wait, is that real or you just made that up?
No, that's actually the rumor is Bendis named Miles after Milestone because he's a fan of the Milestone universe and basically recreated Static, but with Spider-Man powers.
Right. That's a good point.
That's a good.
Oh,
Richard will talk about that subject all day.
Talk about Blood Syndicate. The last issue of Blood Syndicate dropped last week, I think.
That was more like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, whenever it was pretty good.
It was very good.
Blood Syndicate was pretty good.
Shout out to Jeffrey Thorne and Chris Cross. That was a fire issue. If you guys haven't got the last issue 6 of Blood Syndicate, you need to go get that and the whole run.
Yeah, it was good.
Book. And if you're not, even if you never read the original Milestone, you don't have to get that book.
Right. I was somewhat confused by some of the characters and some of their powers. I don't know if it was because there was a long period in between the books dropping or whatever. So during that final battle,
Rico says, I'm sensitive, this is sensitive talk, so I'll leave it alone. It
During
is
that final
sensitive,
battle, I was
dude, but
somewhat
we're cool with
confused.
it. I mean, look, we have our positions on it. We're not changing our positions. I mean, you can argue all day. We do that for a living. You can argue your points all you're wrong. We'll reject them because we think they're wrong, but it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Blood Syndicate was good. As I was saying, I was just somewhat confused by the. I couldn't keep the characters straight or their abilities. Holocaust was a bad character though. Holocaust was that dude.
He had some Killmonger elements to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He did. Yeah, he did.
Well, the last book I wanted to talk about um, was one by Chuck Brown of Bitterroot fame. He has a new series out, which I highly recommend everyone get, called Flawed. Interesting book, dope book. It has. Imagine if you were to take Nita Hawes, Nightmare Blog, and Bitterroot and slam them together. That's this book. You have this character on the cover there. Her name is Jem. We're still learning about her background, but from what we can gather so far, she's from Egypt. So is her family. She's a psychiatrist. I think she kind of focuses on parapsychology as well, the paranormal. And she is a hunter. Think like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Blade or something like that. She's a hunter. She's a monster hunter, and she's going after a serial killer called the Skinwalker, who apparently can't die. You can shoot him, you can slice him, you can dice him, you can set him on fire. The guy won't die. He's a serial killer. And as it turns out, the Skinwalker may be a descendant of a for what was represented kind of an African tribe that merged with these alien scarab monsters, for lack of a better term. And they became the first skinwalkers, is what they call them. But they seem to be more like vampires because they have fangs and they eat humans and they don't die. And this she's on the trail of this skinwalker who's terrorizing the city. Really, really enjoy this book so far. The art is impeccable. Not Sanford Green, which is what you usually hear when you associate with Chuck Brown with Bitterroot, but an artist that is pretty comparable to that style. And it's got kind of the Chuck Brown flavor to it in terms of the writing. I've enjoyed this book. It's on 2 issues have come out so far, and I don't remember if it's a limited series or an ongoing. But I certainly have enjoyed this book and highly recommend Flawed.
Is Bitterroot coming back?
I believe it's supposed to come back next year.
I was talking to Brian the other day, Brian Hawkins, one of the
Yeah.
co-writers of Black Cotton, which is another dope book. And you know, that book is supposed to be coming back next year. I asked him specifically about it, and there was something that they were working on. I can't remember what he told me, but there's something that they were working on. But it'll be coming back next year also. So you'll have to be looking out for that as well. So that's it.
All right. Well, we've been on here for an hour and a half. We thank all of you for watching the show. We ask you to please like and subscribe, and most important, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need to get 1,000 likes, 1,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. It's a great way you can help us out and keep this Black Comic Lords YouTube channel going. We appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for your active comments during the show. So
Appreciate
with that, Mark, I see you next time.
it. Peace.
Peace.